over here. I have a lot of different windows open. I'm just now realizing which should, let's see, I'm gonna just cut these off real quick. There we go, it makes that much easier. Yes, right. Here we go. Look at this. There's our beautiful title page, and let's just get to hiding some panels here. All right. Again, welcome to our presentation here, Infusing Media Literacy in Your Classroom. My name is Adam Wedenius. Emily Bond, Rubina Gulati, Melaine Hook Oftermeyer is out. She helped prepare the presentation. And of course, Lauren Wagner is here. We'll all be having taking some opportunities here to discuss media literacy with everybody. And I think to get us going onto the presentation, I wanted just to start to discuss the context. The context in which we live in our contemporary society. I think we live in a society now where there is a great need for understanding and doing more media literacy. So today we're going to talk to you about some key points surrounding that issue and thinking about the context of our contemporary culture. If you just think about, your everyday activities, just what it takes to get here to this particular point right now. For those of us who are in the room, we get up in the morning, perhaps like you check your cell phone. That's one of the first things I do. Make sure what's going on in the world, see if there's any communications, et cetera. From there, it's getting ready, getting to on the road to come to work. On the road, you're experiencing billboards and the madness of traffic and driving and all that kind of stuff. But even the most mundane tasks like going to the grocery store involve that kind of activity of involving yourself in advertising, being bombarded with images. When we get to campus, we're all required to use a computer. For many of you today, you didn't necessarily get up and go to work in your car, but you're now on your computer in Zoom land watching us. This is a requirement for not just all of us, but also for our students. Our students they need to come to campus, use computers, use email, use Canvas. We are all, to a certain degree, consumed by digital technologies. If you look at this particular week, Flex Week, look at some of the offerings in the past and at present, we have Flex Day activities like best practices for user-friendly online courses. Beyond scrolling, students creating social media content as learning tools. Swipe left, changing the classroom model using social media tactics. Here on campus, not only are we required to use digital technologies, but then we're also requiring students to use them, and we're asking them to go into certain spaces like social media and investigate those particular spaces. So after a long day of instruction and teaching and studentship, many people like to go home and relax. And when you're going home to relax afterwards, of course, what many of us do. I know I watch TV, maybe read a book. Some of you might play video games, but you engage in more media potentially before we go to sleep and repeat the process over and over and over. And so this, I think, is important for us to start to think about the context in which we live. And there's a media scholar whose name is Marshall McLuhan. He has a quote which I believe is very apt for our situation. He says, describing our current context, he says, it's like the fish in the water. We don't know who discovered water, but we know it wasn't the fish. A pervasive medium, a pervasive environment is always beyond perception. So in our current society, and especially here on the CRC campus, we live in a mediated environment, and it's only getting exponentially more complex. And so we're living in a time, of course, where digital technologies, they mediate our emotions, our relationships, our decision-making. They mediate our sense of being in a certain sense. So we have to put ourselves in a space to better understand digital technologies. And of course, when you think about discourse on key issues like race or sexuality, gender, these kinds of things, which we're actively talking about in society, these kinds of discourses are taking place in places like social media, online, in digital spaces. So I think it's up to us as professors and people who are in the space of education to start to think about this, not just in terms of how it affects us in our everyday lives, but how it affects our students, moreover, how it affects our classes and how we prepare for what's only coming, which is more media and more digital technologies evolving exponentially. So for us and our purposes here today, I'm going to transition over to Lauren Wagner, who's going to start to discuss some of the ways in which we're thinking about digital literacy, media literacy, perception, and we're going to talk about a number of different concepts here for you today. So, Lauren, come on up.
Hey, okay, so one thing that I talk about in my, so for those who don't know me or we haven't met yet, I teach radio, TV, film production classes. And so in my classes, part of the discussion, right, is about media and like physically like cameras and lenses and where do we place a camera. Like I'm not loving the angle you guys are probably seeing on Zoom right now. So like that, right, like, so what does that look like? And what are people at home seeing right now? Like this, it's not pretty. So in terms of thinking about those kinds of elements, every single thing, right? Like if I were to ask my class to describe this, it'd be like, is it a trick? It's like a crowd of people. Like, what are we looking at? But when we really kind of look at it, I've used these images, this one and the following, to talk about lenses and lens distortion potentially on cameras and camera placement, right? So if we were to look at this image, you might say it's a group of people, or it's a bunch of people, or people are all kind of standing together. If I were to tell you this image was taken during COVID when there were distance restrictions, you might say, right, by looking at the image, well, those people aren't following that. That's not what they're doing. But if we move forward, if I click the right button, haha, this is different camera angle, different lens. So we can see here, they are standing the requisite, distance apart from one another, but just by moving that camera and adjusting its location, the audience is getting a totally different sense of and understanding of what's going on and what's really happening. So the interpretation, right? Like there's what we actually see with our own eyes, but because like Adam was saying, like we're so plugged into media and media in one way. And I mean, this is stuff, wow, in the last century when I was in college, when I was taking classes, we would talk about these kinds of camera angles and how you can cheat things if you only have this many people, like group them together and shoot them low and get them in a group. And that's how you're going to maximize not having enough actors for a scene. But we can also see, right, that that information, I always ask my students to raise their hand and swear that they'll use what I'm teaching them for good and not evil, to think about how we're relaying messages. And when I showed these images to some students last semester, one was like, oh my God, like if people were seeing that first picture, they would think, well, nobody's social distancing. Like, I don't have to do that. Or why am I doing this if those people aren't? But they're not seeing this second image that we're looking at now. And so if we don't experience something for ourselves, a lot of times we're relying on images. And this is not like heavily Photoshopped. This isn't super trickery. It looks like a real photo because it is one, but it just is dealing with, right, these very basic principles of camera stuff. And if we look at them side by side, you can again kind of see, right, like what would your perception be, or how would you caption one image versus the other? And for many of us, right, like numbers of places we've never been, numbers of people we're never going to meet in our lifetime. So we're relying on media. So social media can open the world in one sense, but we're also, right, in most social media, we're only getting someone's highlight reel from their life. We're not seeing the day-to-day. And we're seeing filters that might not be what people actually look like to begin with. And we're also seeing, right, this sense of kind of curated images, and people are putting things online that are then being used by the viewers, the people consuming the media, to think about, well, that's what the reality is because I just saw it. And yeah, you saw it, but like from what angle? And where was the camera? And what was not being shown? By me looking at you, I'm not looking at the people in the room. And if I'm looking at the people in the room, I'm not looking at you, because we have to kind of pick in terms of where things are. And that's just the reality of mediated content. All right, so Alcatraz, like if you've ever been to San Francisco and you've ever seen Alcatraz, right? The images on the top make it look pretty close and very humongous. But when you're standing, if you've been to Pier 39 and like you got family visiting and you're going to go see it from the pier, you do see that there's some distance there. And you do, so the lower right image, we can see, right, from the backside of Alcatraz, there is a really big distance. And so we don't, right, like we're not seeing the people on the pier or along the edge of San Francisco when we're looking at that lower right image because of the actual distance. But by compressing things, by using a long lens, we're making it seem like that space is condensed, even though the distance is what it is. It's just our perception of it is very different based on what we're looking at. And now I am turning it over to back to Adam Wedenius, everyone. Hang on, here we go.
All righty, so thank you, Lauren. I want to start to give you a little bit of data and some of the research that we've done surrounding this issue of media literacy, but also start to think about, again, the context in which we consume media and who consumes media and how do we consume media. Some research here this is from a report titled "The State of Media Education in the United States." It's by the Pew Center for Research. It was done in 2024. And the quote here says, "When the Pew Center began systematically tracking Americans' internet usage in early 2000, about half of all adults were already online. Today, 96% of US adults say they use the internet." So that's 96% of US adults say that they use the internet in 2024. 2025, I'm only assuming that that number is going up because that number has just continued to rise ever since we started tracking that particular number. So thinking about this, what do people use the internet for? Well, we use it to message, contact each other. We use it for entertainment. We prepare finances, gather news and information. We can shop, we can work, we can go to school. There's a number of different ways in which we might utilize digital technologies. And that 96% is using the internet in so many different ways. So it's this one-stop shop then, essentially, for us to be able to interact with each other and do the things we need to do to make our lives whatever we want them to be. Now, if 96% of Americans, and of course 100% of our students are using the internet, then it stands to reason that we should be preparing ourselves, but also our students, to understand how to use those technologies, because as they traverse through Kasumnes and into the world, not only are they going to use those digital technologies here, but they're going to use them in the world in which they are now existing and hopefully making better. So overwhelmingly, this is another quote. This is data from the National Association for Media Literacy Education. It states that overwhelmingly, media literacy education is happening through informal contexts in schools, 35.2%, and mostly within library education curriculum at also 34%. So this is to say then that media literacy education isn't necessarily happening in formal contexts. It's being done in spaces, in certain spaces, right? There's, of course, educational spaces and in library spaces. But I think this is a call for us as professors to start to think more about media literacy and to infuse it more into our own spaces, and to think about not just where students can get involved with media literacy through a media literacy class, but also in English classes or in your car technology classes and all sorts of spaces on campus. If we continue then to define what media literacy is, because we've been talking a lot about media literacy. Well, media literacy is defined as, quote, the ability to access, analyze, evaluate, create, and act using all forms of communication. So this, of course, is especially important in lieu of what we just talked about, of the internet being a one-stop shop. Media literacy then gives us the ability to navigate those spaces and to think critically about them, and to put ourselves into a space to ask questions, and to not just accept the very things that are passing in front of our screens at such a rapid pace. Media literacy education is another quote I'm going to borrow from Higdon. Media literacy education. So when we think about media literacy and involve it with education, it, quote, emphasizes critical inquiry about media industries' roles in society, including how these industries influence and are influenced by systems of power, how they provide us with implications for equity, inclusion, social justice, sustainability, and ask us to think critically about learning environments, and ask us to have difficult conversations that are taboo to a certain degree. So media literacy puts us into a space to, again, ask questions about the world and to think critically about the spaces we occupy. And it asks us to have difficult conversations and to approach one another respectfully and to have those conversations in ways that we can understand each other better and understand that we are all different. We're all different people and we all have different perspectives on the world. Media literacy celebrates the differences that we all exude and perform. So to transition to just a little bit of information to kind of further go into that, if 96% of people are using the internet over just half of US adults, about 54%, say they at least sometimes get news from social media. So at least sometimes 54% of people are getting news and information from social media. So out of all those 96% of people who are out there, half of them are looking at sites like Twitter or Reddit or Snapchat to get their news and information. And of course, if that's just adults, you start to think about students and younger individuals who are, of course, also more immersed in those particular spaces. If we start to break that down a little bit further, you can take a look at this graph here and you can see the age ranges, percentage of each social media site's regular news consumers who are. So if we think about this, look at the graph that says ages 18 to 29. You can see there 22% of people ages 18 to 29 get their news and information from Facebook. 24% get it from YouTube, 39 get it from Instagram, 38 from X or Twitter, 45 from TikTok, Reddit, 43%. Snapchat, 53% of students or younger individuals 18 to 29 are getting their information and news from Snapchat. These are not your traditional news organizations, of course. And again, I think it's loudly resonating this call for more media literacy, more understanding of how these particular spaces operate, more critical thought about how they operate, so that when we're scrolling through these particular spaces, we're not just eating up everything that's in front of us and saying, oh, that's what Twitter says, so that's what we're going to do. All right, we're going to transition to another exercise here. This is emotions and narrative. So I'm going to ask Emily Bond to come on up. Emily?
So, creators of media are using language to, and specifically linguistic framing, to make you feel a certain way about the information that's presented to you. And we see this not just in social media, we see this in advertising, we see this in formal writing, we see this in all kinds of information that's consumed. So we have an example here, and I want us to like pause and think about it. And I know that some folks are on Zoom land, so I am gonna toggle the view. Well, I won't toggle the view. Maybe we can take a look at my laptop for, do you want to look at the chat? Yeah. So we have two statements here. The Guardian statement says US adds 175,000 jobs in April and 40th straight month of gains as unemployment stays below 4% in longest such streak since 1953. The second posting says US employers added 175,000 jobs in April, a downshift in the pace of hiring. The unemployment rate ticked up to 3.9%. So how is the event framed in those two posts? And what words or phrases stand out to you? Yeah, so we have stays below versus ticked up, right? Same data. Gains versus a downshift. So what the writers have done is they've chosen a tone, right, to present the same data from one direction versus another. And that, if you're only reading one headline, you're going to come away as a reader with a perspective that either things are going great, looking up, or, you know, everything is going down the drain and we're losing jobs and everything's going trending the wrong direction. Emotions and linguistic framing can be used by a lot of, there's a lot of different techniques that might be used. Writers use things like inflammatory language or rage bait. So kind of, we saw this on maybe a milder scale where we've got ticked up versus stays below, so the positive and negative language. But in some cases, it's a headline that says, you know, person plans to eliminate this type of education or eliminate funding, or something that is maybe taking and highlighting the positive or negative facts in a post or an event. Sometimes the language is inclusive, like they're trying to say we, us, our, and make you feel like you're part of the problem or part of the solution. Maybe it's a positive post and they're trying to get you to be part of a group or feel as though you're part of a group. Linguistic framing can be relying on connotation, kind of the social understanding, or maybe not just the definition of a term or a phrase, but looking at kind of how it's understood in a cultural context. Sometimes it can be, linguistic framing can be use of metaphor or other types of language to provide more of a picture and kind of draw the reader in. And those are techniques that we use as writers, but then when we start to see it in social media, when we start to see it in news media and advertising, it often takes on a different life and how it's impacting the person who is consuming that media. You'll also see, like this example, the use of data. Data, as in the numbers, may, we of course will read and understand it differently, but sometimes the way that it's presented in the media is going to make a big difference on how what we come away with as far as an understanding of that particular data. Yes.
Is that the people?
I believe so. This was a picture was grabbed and cropped before I had the dates on it. Yes, thank you. But I was looking through my phone this week for more examples, and anywhere you turn, I'm seeing it on social media, I'm seeing it on news, I'm seeing it on my Google results, and searches that are coming up. Examples of how the same event or headline is presented by multiple outlets. And I know you're going to talk a little bit more about our news. So are you ready to transition? Yeah. Okay. Ravina's going to come up and talk a little bit about how we decode our language. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm actually, hi, everybody. Again, not sure where to look. I'm Ravina Galati, and I teach journalism on campus, and I also teach mass media and society, which is one of the classes that we really look at media literacy. And I'm the advisor of the Connection, which is our college news media staff. And we have been, I'm going to put in a plug for the Connection real quick. We have been in existence since 1970, since the college opened, and we were in print. Oops, this is going forward. We were in print until 2020, and now we are online. We have an app, and we are still reporting and still doing the great work that we've been doing. I want to make a comment just about this slide, and then I'm going to go on and add some information to it. So one of the things I just want you to notice is that in my classes in journalism and mass media, I would be thrilled if one of my students came in and said, hey, I read this in The Guardian. Hey, I read this in the New York Times. They never say that. They tell me, I saw it on my phone. I saw it on social media. And this is, I think, on X. It looks like a verified, account from that was posted. And also some of our students, when they're coming in to, engage with media studies, might not realize that there's more to the story than this post, right? There's a full story. Many of us as educators, many of us as educators know that this is a headline and there is a news story. And I know, I hope you do too, that in the news story, there will be sources for the data. So it's not just about taking a piece of data and believing it, right? And just repeating it. Like I might want to look at and say, okay, is it from the Bureau of Labor Statistics? Is it from the White House? Who generated that information? And then what meaning do I want to make from the source, right? So just wanted to mention that because I thought that was a great moment to do that. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit more, and we're going to go a little bit into looking at some headlines together. And the conversation we're having today is how to infuse media literacy into your classroom. So I'm going to invite you into a lesson that I might do with my students, and I'm going to ask you to share your ideas as I share ideas with you. So first of all, from the same research that Adam was sharing with us before from the Pew Research Center, I just wanted to kind of focus up on this top quadrant up here with my clicker. I'm kind of pointing to it. In terms of digital devices, if we add up, 86% of US adults are often, or at least sometimes, getting news from a digital device. Many, and this is where I'm adding my anecdotal information from my classroom, if not a majority of the students who come into my courses, don't differentiate between the source of digital information. They don't differentiate between, did I see it on social media? Did I see it on a website? Did a friend send it to me? Did a friend put it on TikTok? And it was interesting to hear, I think, Adam talk about Snapchat as being one of the sources of news, because on Snapchat, is it your best friend who is just talking about something that they, are sharing with you and sharing their opinion, which is perfectly valid and maybe more valuable to you than, somebody who has, more context in news? Or is it a news outlet, or is it somebody who you might trust? Maybe it's an economist, maybe it's an expert on a topic. So really kind of important in my class, we build into like, okay, what is going on and, what are you consuming? I will share with you one other thing. We have a resource guide that we're going to share with you that our librarians so graciously put together. And on there's a documentary called Trust Me. And in that documentary, one of the things, points that I love, and I've been using it in my classes last few semesters, it talks about how, we all grew up with telephones. But the difference now is that our youth and ourselves, we are going home at the end of the day. And on the other side of the telephone are about 1,000 engineers trying to figure out how to keep us looking at our screens, right? How they're designing the algorithm to keep us hooked, right? I have my students do an exercise where I ask them to look at their media consumption for a week. And it's not unusual to have 20, 30 hours looking at social media. Reels on TikTok or reels on Instagram or video games or, other things. And certainly many of them are looking at podcasts and looking at, maybe they're watching sports games because that's their, but it's just really interesting to look at and to ask ourselves, what are they bringing to the table? Okay, so I wanted to offer you a couple of tools that I use in my classes and you might want to look at if you want to incorporate a lesson. So Ground News and All Sides. I think All Sides is a bit more accessible. Ground News seems to require more of a subscription-based model to access some of the advanced features. But they share with you articles from multiple perspectives. And so it can be a great way to look at a topic from different news outlets. And they also interview a lot of readers and consumers. So the second point there says both sites have a rigorous process of looking at multiple pieces and interviewing Americans who consume these sources for what was their takeaway and what is their political stance. And they sort of categorize news as left, center, and right. And they also invite you to give them feedback if you agree with their assessment. So, all of our political points of view are very nuanced, I would say now. And so, you might not agree exactly with their assessment, but it's a great place to start for the conversation for our students. Okay, so let's look at a topic that was in the news this week. So on Monday, you may have heard that President Trump posted on Truth Social, which is the social media network that he launched, he started, I believe he still owns. And also just ask yourself too, the naming of the outlet, right? It's not Facebook, it's not Twitter, it's not X, it's Truth Social, right? Intentionally named. And so we might have students who come in and say, well, isn't that the truth if it's called Truth, right? So we need to ask ourselves, right? Like, what are we looking at? So this is the first headline of 3 that I'm going to share with you. And this is an opportunity for those of you who are in the room and on Zoom, if you want to share your thoughts about this. So the first one says, Trump announces he'll helm movement to eliminate mail-in voting and voting machines, quote, or colon, fight like hell. So what is your takeaway or what sticks out to you about that headline? Do you have any expectations about what you might read in this article, or do any words stick out to you? Helm. Okay. Yeah, anything else? Yeah, yeah. Yes. Eliminate. Yeah, yeah. That is a strong term. Yeah. One thing that I want to share with you from the perspective of people who produce news, I don't know how many of you are aware of this, but when you see a headline and you see what I call single quotes, that typically means it's a direct quote from the article. So sometimes if you don't know that, you might think, oh, the journalist is like using air quotes as our students talk about, you know, sometimes, or the journalist is just heightening this or adding emotion. But typically when the single quotes like this, and also just to preview the actual post that Trump posted on Truth Social, those words were also capitalized. So they are truly using his words as he did, right? So just sometimes our students aren't aware of that, yeah. That's a great question. That's a great question. Okay, so I'm going to give you one more headline about the same topic. This next one we're adding, it says, Trump vows to target mail-in ballots ahead of 2026 midterm election. So what words in that headline? Same topic. So what words are, okay. Announce or vow. Yeah, there's a difference. Mhm.
The idea of targeting mail-in ballots feels like, oh, he's gonna try really hard. Yeah. Whereas eliminate mail-in voting sounds like it's done.
Okay, target. All right. Okay, yeah.
Ahead of 2026, it implies that there's some urgency on his part to get something done prior to what could be happening in a couple different states.
Yes. Yeah, and if you're not familiar, and again, we have amazing classes in history and political science at our campus. Not all of our students will know when the midterm election is in 2026, right? Like if our students are reading this with us. So it's important to talk about like when is that election and why, you know, add some context, right? So, okay, third headline, same topic. Trump says he will leave movement to end mail-in voting. Movement. Anything else? He's going to lead the movement. And again, just as a nod to what we just talked about, these single quotes are because he used the word movement in his Truth Social post. So a lot of this are his words from the Truth Social post. And we would see that in the article. Okay, so these are 3 headlines from 3 different news articles that I got from All Sides. If any of you want to look deeper at this, I'm going to share some more information with you, but All Sides, this was 2 days ago. All Sides still has the full analysis up on their website if you want to go and look at the, you know, articles or share them with your students in some form or fashion. Okay, so next slide, what I would do also in this lesson is I would have them read the articles. And so I would either print them in my, you know, in-person class, or I would share the links with them and have them look at them. And we would look deeper at the language, at the tone, at the words, just like what we've been doing here. I did not want to share I didn't want to share the full article because I knew we would be limited on time. But I wanted to give you opportunity to start to dissect. So I'm going to share 2 articles and we're going to look at some of the language. And I know this is a lot of words, and this is the first 5 paragraphs of story A. And I've just labeled them story A. I think story A went with headline 1, but just go ahead and look at this on your screen. Can those of you in the room read this? I don't believe I need to read it aloud to any of you. So go ahead and look at that. And just note for yourself maybe some of the words that stick out to you, or actually, let's talk about some of the words that stick out to you, and then we'll look at another one, and then I'll show you my, my take. Did you have any, are you okay, Emily? Do you have comments? Oh, you're avoiding the glare. Okay. His writing style stands out. So we have a comment for those of you who are at home. Yeah. His writing style stands out. I guess we all know it.
But I would say this, well, which is the teeth of seeing the law. So is to quote what was said, it's actually accurate to do so, but then you don't say whether or not the person is correct or incorrect in what they put in their quote. So to say that unless you were the president was in an election, it's not actually accurate according to the Constitution of the United States of America. So there's like a differential there, and so I think that that's part of it as well, is because I have students that'll quote things or they'll quote like a fraction of something that they saw on social media, and I'm like, well, what was the rest of the article? And it's, I don't know, like, oh, I just remember the words that stood out to me. They don't really have the context for how they put together.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a tool I'm going to share with you in a couple of slides, which last fall during the presidential election, I had my students take a claim that they had heard in the election and then take it through some of our fact checking tools. And so that's another part of media literacy that we want to teach them that skill, right? That we want to give them those tools. Okay, what sticks out to you? Is anybody in the chat room sharing some words that stick out, or anybody in the room want to?
All caps.
Yeah, well, the all caps come directly from his Truth Social post. So again, you know, the journalists are reporting accurately, just like Lauren said. Yeah, you want to add?
I don't know.
Sure.
Also, but you tend to use the all caps at the wrong time. I mean, for me, seriously controversial voting machines, I feel like at least controversial should be in all caps. But when these highlights, so again, coming from the bias standpoint, my view is I have preconceived notion of what.
Little point.
But yeah, it's like I just saw a news clip last night, on CNN or something, where he was saying a bunch of stuff about the mail-in ballots and all this other stuff, and how all of their countries don't use them anymore. That's false. A lot of their countries still do use them, so yeah, it's just he's trying to highlight things again, as one of the previous slides showed. 58% of males get their news through social, so he's targeting that 50% there and take it as gospel. Oh, states must obey the president. So
And yeah, and if they're spinning it,
right,
you're just saying the bold, like that's what's kind of stick with you.
yeah.
That's the part.
Yeah, and people will repeat it, and they'll repeat parts of it without a full story too, right?
Mentioned the word integrity stood out, asserted, allegedly mixing, declaring, so they're like strong, seriously controversial, and the good of our country in all caps. So like we were saying, the words that he's choosing that are bolded.
Yeah, well, the ones that are all in caps are his caps. So yeah. Adam, you want to add something?
Battle. For the country, to take something that is kind of, it's an important issue, ballots and voting, but
eliminating now about, this is not something that we need to have a movement for, and it delegitimizes actual movements that are taking place in our current society that are of great import.
Mhm,
When it comes to social justice issues like race, ethnicity, sexuality, things like that.
mhm.
So it's in a certain sense too, if everything becomes a movement, then no movement's having a legitimacy, and that's also, I think, an important strategy that is part of some of this use of language.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I
No.
think the use of language is an example of like using the connotation when you have movement and battle and these things that are very, they bring to mind, right? They bring to mind the fact that we're fighting the forces of evil or fighting against something. And so it brings emotion to that statement.
Yeah, certainly. For the folks that are in the chat room, do you need us to repeat any comments that are in the room, or are they able to hear? Are they hearing some of the comments in the room?
I can hear him pretty well. I feel like I can hear him pretty well.
The other thing I would add too is that we need to help our students realize too the differences between, you know, what is a news outlet. This is from a news outlet. What words are written by the journalist? What words in here are quoted from the president, right? Because some people might just say, oh, the New York Times said this, but it's really a quote of, you know, Donald Trump speaking, right? So again, having that media literacy skill of like nuance. And it pains me to say this, but I'm just going to say this, which is many of our students who walk in my classroom do not know if there was ever a print newspaper or there was ever, you know, news online before there was social media, right? So it's really, they really lack context. Not all of them, but many of them. So, so much to teach them in media literacy. Okay, so I'm going to show you one more article and then I'm just going to make a couple of points about each one. So again, and I've consciously not told you what the outlets are, I will tell you in a moment. Okay, so this is story B, and go ahead and take a look at it. And again, it's just one slide. I know it's lots of words. It's the first 5 paragraphs, just to be fair. Some direct quotes also, so. Okay, what's sticking out to you in what you've read so far? Anything? Yeah.
For me, it's very little piece of what we're talking about with the article, but the fact that it's a very expensive. Says the guy who wants to put in $1.5 billion and he'll get from cutter to fashion on his R747.
Mm-hmm.
That is to be taken for something. It says not under defense. So.
Yeah.
And then it's golf course.
Yeah. So a comment that looking at the expensive reference in terms of other things that we're spending money on. So Emily?
Checking about how states administer elections.
Mm-hmm.
And then Maisie added pledge disproportionately favor legal challenges, traditionally battlefield and breakup or break grip. And so I think Maisie's looking at the language
Mm-hmm.
being used in that.
Yeah. Yeah. All of those.
That position of these, how they respond, and you get a sort of a better sense of what the issues.
Yeah.
as it relates to on both sides of the line. I mean, there's sort of a person, and then including certain things, like you said, including the expenses, the big quote, the volume, something. But to me, the water's kind of at the end, spreading out.
So a comment from Adam that it's provides a bit more context. I know I didn't sum up everything he said, but just for our folks at home, if they're not hearing us yet.
Context and a bit of the story, by the time you get to the quote, you're not as emotionally hot as more perhaps as you know, the pathos isn't quite as extreme. And like you were saying, there's more context to, you know, more of a truth, you know, how these things truth, but just more of a contextual perspective on the issues themselves versus the language that's used by him.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so in the interest of time, I'm going to show you, just highlight the next slide, which is some of the words that I highlighted. And I would tell you, as a journalism professor who teaches students to go out and report, I never permit the use of the word declared, asserted, claimed in any sort of attribution. I tell my students, we are reporting neutrally, we are reporting objectively. How do we know, what do we know that they said? We know the words that came out of their mouth, so we use the word said. And my students say, that sounds redundant. I'm like, you've read it your whole life. And I would be able to point to many professional examples where they could see that. However, now if they're reading this and viewing it as a professional example, I have to, I have to say, well, there are different newsrooms who have different writing styles or whatever, but this is not, even in the first one, President Trump declared, the declared is the word of the reporter, right? He will spearhead a push. Those are the words of the reporter in what we would call the first paragraph or the lead. Even in a lengthy Truth Social post on Monday, President Trump asserted, and then it said that. Even if we just swap that out for the word said, right? That's what he said, or wrote, right? That would be somewhat more neutral. And in the last paragraph, Trump claimed that nixing the use, again, nixing is something that the journalist put in, or the reporter for this outlet. Okay, next one. Also things to highlight, right? So some of us in the room, or maybe not, might say, oh, we're adding context, right? Somebody who doesn't want the context to be in the story might say, oh, no, you're favoring one side. You're giving, more airtime or more space to his opponents, Trump's opponents, right? But there is some context where it says a move likely to disproportionately favor his Republican Party. Unclear if the president has the constitutional power. Yes, it invites context, but again, people, depending on where you're sitting, right? I could take Lauren's visual slides and talk about what's our political point of view through which, and political lens through which we're looking at all of this. And then going to the second column, nationwide referendum, right? Even calling the midterm elections nationwide referendum. If you agree there's going to be a referendum, you might like that, others might disagree. Democrats will be seeking to break the Republicans' grip, right? Again, sounds like a battle. So just really interesting. Okay, any guesses on story A, story B outlets? AP? Okay, Associated Press. Anybody have a guess? Adam knows the answer. So Adam, you're not supposed to answer this question. Okay, so this is just a snapshot from all sides, and this is still online. So the first one that we read was from Fox News Digital, and at the bottom you can see that there is kind of a left, center, right like scale, and they have evaluated this as being a article from the right. So they are saying that this Fox News Digital article represents more of a right point of view, meaning more, in our country, I would say more conservative or Republican. From the center, that was the second one that we read, Trump vows to target mail-in ballots, and that's from Reuters, which is a wire service in the UK. And they are, all sides is evaluating that to be a center article. There could definitely be some people who might be on the right side who would say, no, that was liberal because you're providing all that context and saying he doesn't have the power to do that. And then I did not give you the third article. There was one from ABC that said Trump says he will lead movement to end mail-in voting, and they evaluated that one from the left, but that was the third headline. But also I want you to notice this headline from all sides. Trump announces plan to eliminate mail-in ballots, machine voting ahead of 2026 midterm. I do feel like the all sides headline is a bit more neutral than the three that we had in those outlets.
It's interesting.
Needed and good alternatives.
Yeah, and that's what I was referencing in terms of the nuance of our points of view, right?
Announces, eliminate from the right headline, and uses the machine voting and
Yeah, I mean, well, they were consuming all of that information, but probably before they wrote their own headline, so they could be influenced, right? They could definitely be influenced. Okay, I have two more ideas to share with you. I'm going to go through them quickly because I feel like I'm taking more time than we agreed to have me take. So, thank you. I just wanted to share with you a couple of fact-checking resources. So I share
You need me to move?
fact-check.org and PolitiFact, and sometimes, and we do have an
Pardon me?
assignment where they will take a claim and then they will look at it.
I don't
And
know. Ring the
there
doorbell, they'll tell
was
you.
a reference later in the articles, we didn't read it in the first 5 paragraphs, where this was also part of the Truth Social post where President Trump said, we are now the only country in the world that uses mail-in voting. I think you referenced that in terms of some of the broadcast outlets that you were watching the news on yesterday. And then both PolitiFact and factcheck.org, Snopes did not have anything about it on their site yesterday when I was looking to update this slideshow. But both PolitiFact and factcheck.org did have articles to clarify that, as well as some of the states' rights and the voting claims that Trump made. So according to the International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance, 11 other nations allow their voters to use some form of mail-in voting, and 22 additional countries allow some voters to cast ballots by mail. So yeah, we have a responsibility as media literate individuals to look at some of the claims and or find resources and tools that we feel like we trust and people that we want to follow, right? I definitely encourage my students, I don't know if they always do it, to curate their social media feeds and to think about, who do they want to follow? Sometimes after talking about it in class, they're kind of like, I don't want to look at any news, because it's not fun, right? Some of us feel strong emotions when we read this stuff. And so it's certainly not fun, but I would say that, not to get too philosophical, but we are democracy, if we're going to keep taking action to support our own beliefs. Okay, last slide. What is the impact? A Stanford neuroscientist looked at 30 million social media news posts from 2011 to 2020 and found news sources posted twice as much negative news as positive. That is not new. That has been happening since the beginning of news. I would say 1800s, because many times news is about conflict and what people are disagreeing about in our communities. Yeah, sources that skewed right or left were more likely to be shared and go viral. And this is specifically talking about social media posts. And lastly, according to the American Psychological Association, exposure to misinformation increases the odds that people will believe it, which in turn increases the odds that they will spread it. People don't necessarily need to believe it in order to share it. And lastly, some people might share it to signal their political affiliation or to disparage perceived opponents. And I think we can probably see examples of that. And also, truly, if you go back, I talk about this in my class also, if you go back to the beginning or the highlight of like politics and television and early political ads have always been so negative and so charged with the emotion, and it still is, right? We still see political ads, and if we fact checked all of them, we would be pretty busy all day long, right? Okay, so those are the ideas I wanted to share, and I will pass it along to Adam.
we wanted to start to finish up here with just some ways to start to think about media literacy in your own classrooms, on campus, and in just general spaces where you might think it's applicable in your own lives. When it comes to media literacy and strategies for sharing and engaging more in media literacy, 4 words come to mind: clarify, collaborate, scale, and invest. So there's many different ways we might clarify media literacy in terms of having discussions about it, collaborate with one another in terms of strategies to include media literacy in our classes on campus and with each other, scale, to scale it, of course, across not just our campus, but hopefully throughout the district, and as a way to start to include these kinds of practices as kind of common practice for people. And of course, invest ourselves into having these conversations, do something about it, go out and perform action behind your words. So we just put together a list of things here that might be some things you might consider. So of course, Flex and PD offerings. You're here right now engaging in Flex and PD offerings. So we much appreciate that. And I know myself, I plan to put on more of PD offerings in this kind of space and engage in this conversation much more and start to, of course, talk about these ideas in more nuanced ways on campus. Of course, assess your curriculum. Just kind of go through your curriculum, ask questions about it. Is there spaces where I might be inserting certain forms of bias? Is there places where I could provide more equitable resources, or spaces that you can potentially think about reassessing as a way to think about the impact that media might have on it? Do you have assignments that use media? How do you use your Canvas courses? How do you ask students to engage with things like the internet or media, social media sites? Let's see. Require and increase course offerings of the following: mass media society, news writing, reporting, agricultural marketing. So this is just increasing these kinds of classes on campus, seeing an increase for these kinds of ideas on campus, but also working these kinds of spaces into your programs. Is there a space in your program to consider how media affects what it is that you do? If you're in a space like me, film and media studies, there's a lot of space for you to be able to think about that. If you're in a space like, nutrition, you may not necessarily think, well, there's, not necessarily ways that media literacy can help nutrition, but again, thinking about the way in which you approach nutrition, maybe think about the ways that you ask your students to use the computers and track their data, or are they using applications to influencers making stuff up on, food influencing. Yes, somebody on Instagram saying only eat a certain thing. Absolutely. And podcasts as well, absolutely, surrounding those issues. So just thinking more about those spaces, reaching out to professors across the Los Rios districts. This is something else that I'm involved in, reaching out to other professors across the district and having conversations with them, engaging in campus discussions. This is where a lot of us can be on the same page, right? We're all in rooms together. We're all going to be seeing each other this week. These are things we can all be discussing when it comes to our classrooms and the spaces we occupy here on campus. Work with your librarians. I can't emphasize this enough. The librarians on campus reach out every semester. We all see the emails, come to the library, utilize the resources, tutoring services, everything that the library does. The library has wonderful resources. They have graciously developed a media literacy guide that we're going to share and talk about here in a second. So there's a lot of resources with them that they can share to how to better engage yourself with media literacy on campus. And that, of course, leads us to the research guide here. This is something that you can throw this into the, right, Emily? She's already on top of it, of course. I didn't even have to ask. I just know you're already on top of it. The librarians have put together, and specifically Emily and Melaine have put together a CRC media literacy research guide. And Emily's going to put the link into the chat there. And you can take a look at that. And that has all sorts of vital resources to start engaging with media literacy. There's some good introductory documentaries on the topic. There's some spaces that you can interact with that talks about things like misinformation and disinformation. And just a space to start thinking more critically about the world around us through media literacy. Now, I want to just finish up then today. We can also finish up with some comments and some questions if y'all are having them, because we're getting to the end of things here. But as one final, I think, call to action, perhaps. I want us to just think about a couple of different quotes that I pulled that are speaking about media literacy and how media literacy functions. And I want to juxtapose that with our mission and values. So on the left, I have done something similar as Professor Gulati did, kind of highlighted some key terms here from the mission and values that we have on campus. And as you start going through, you can start to see there's a lot of really important words here: inclusive, equitable, educate, eliminating racism, discrimination, empowerment, equitable, inclusive, diverse, respect, compassion, empathy, inclusion, reflective processes, empowering marginalized voices, nurturing identity. So you can start to go through and think about, these are the things we talk about during meetings like this, during Flex Week, and especially at things like Convocation on Friday. Now, look at these couple of quotes that speak to what media literacy and how media literacy functions. Media literacy scholars contend that a media literacy education can empower users to benefit from the affordances of social media while mitigating the more malignant influences of content. A critical lens centers power to allow for further exploration on racial, gendered class, sexual dynamics that shape power relations in the US. So when you look at this particular quote, it speaks to the same values that our mission and values, speaks to on campus. We're using the same terminology here. Media literacy fosters education. It empowers. It allows for us to put a critical lens onto spaces of power. It allows for us to explore race, gender, class, sexual dynamics. It asks us to serve all learners, to challenge educational systems, to think about the policies and practices, to, of course, provide more equitable opportunities. Media literacy education speaks to racial and ethnic diversity. So these are all the things that, when we perform media literacy and we do media literacy studies, we are doing the very thing that we seek out or set out to do as a campus and as a culture and as a community. If we want to continue moving forward with these missions and values, media literacy is another tool in our arsenal to be able to continue to do these things, not just for ourselves, but for our students. And so hopefully for larger communities and, I mean, the world around us, especially. And that's what these kinds of things can help us to do. So I want to thank everybody for participating. And I also want to open up the floor here at this point to questions, comments, or thoughts, or anything of the sort that people might be having on Zoom or in the room with respect to any of the ideas that we've talked about, or if you want to challenge us on a couple of points, or if there's things you want to express about anything at all that we've been talking about here. This is, of course, an open space for us to be able to talk about these kinds of things. So we welcome any feedback or any questions or comments or thoughts at this particular point. Yeah.
But I must say, I appreciate one, it's always nice to see the cases and see the people controlling their craft, if you will, with that involved. But I was thinking as we were speaking there about media literacy and what we read every day, just going back to what I know my kids read every day or watch every day, things of that nature. But then think about, since the pandemic, essentially, media, multimedia, social media has exploded with different platforms without any, semblance of literacy. And so many people have been able to, reach out to Snapchat, TikTok, I still call it Twitter, and Facebook, all these different places, and they never once even contemplate the idea that they need to be literate in all those different platforms. And how that information is being disseminated. So, not only do our students and our children read this stuff, we're trying to impart that onto them. We have so many adults out there that, in other aspects, we think they are knowledgeable people, they are educated people, but yet they still fail to research what they are reading and see the literary aspect of that information, which in many cases is misinformation or disinformation. Something I actually had I think earlier this morning, I read an article. So, whether or not that information is accidentally misinterpreted or misrepresented, or if it in fact is being misrepresented on purpose and presenting a falsehood to try and sway people. And it's just, I'm constantly looking things up just to see what happens. And it's a small case in point, it's a stupid little case in point, really, on my Facebook. For some reason, I started getting these feeds about sports, and every single headline that comes up from this particular outlet is false. Every single one, every headline so far is completely 100% false. But all the comments, you'll read them, there are thousands of comments, and everybody believes the headline. Without even clicking on the article or going into, just typing into, I'm looking for it, it's all.
I think to kind of go off that too is, once you're plugged into any of this, like, our time is being monetized by someone else for it, right? So it's whatever you're putting in the eyeballs, and do this, buy the product, and do this, and then on top of it, to lead into some flex stuff for tomorrow, like it's the AI component as well. And once you click on one thing, even if you realize partway through, you're like, oh, this is AI, oh, this is your algorithm just shifted, and now you gotta like, the amount of time I spend de-algorithming stuff, right? I'm like, oh, okay, this is like 5%, you start thinking of all these things, just like shift where it's like, what? I was studying my phone, I didn't click this, and like now I'm getting whatever. It's just really.
LTT position.
I think too.
I will be able,
It comes to you. It comes to you. Yeah, they send you alerts. Yeah.
Or product, and she doesn't want the same ideas. It filtered through into her phone. She had never talked about that product, ever looked at it. And now it's on her. So
We have to on campus start acknowledging that media literacy is a necessary life skill. It's right up there with math and reading and all the other things. We make our students take those classes coming through here. You have to do, because of, there's policies and all those kinds of stuff, but also because we want them to be good at life. We want them to be good people. And as media technology and digital technologies continue to advance and escalate, only exponentially getting better, media literacy becomes more and more a life skill that is necessary.
it's lifestyle.
Yep.
Another good example back for advertising. Zoom listening. My daughter and I have to go back over and to move into her. Southwest for a round trip ticket this Saturday to Irvine and back is costing $1,600. $1,600. Well, and right after we saw that, an ad popped up on, I think it was Facebook. Southwest, $39 round trip, back now. Well, only if you flew between these dates. So, just something simple like that, you have to kind of research what that means. But yeah, that was just really cool. It's a cost of 60. We can go to Hawaii for this. Yeah, sorry, I'm not gonna start this semester.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Let's all just go right now. There we go. That's a good one. Oh yeah, Media Literacy Week is coming up as well. When is that, Rubina? I put it on my calendar, but and then was there anything on the chat that anybody had brought up just in terms of points or? Okay. And so we're right up against it as well. So I think that we can adjourn the meeting. If anybody else has anything to say or any thoughts, we can talk. We'll do one last plug for Media Literacy Week here. Did you put that in there, Emily? All right, Emily's, of course, on top of it, dropping in dates into the chat for Media Literacy Week, which is coming up in October, I believe.
Yeah,
Last week of October, yeah.
Would like to keep sharing more information about literacy.
Mhm.
Yeah, so please share with us ideas that you might have, things that you notice in the classrooms that you'd like more support on.
Absolutely.
Secretly, there may be a library.
We'll have library display and hopefully some digital resources that you can share in your classroom.
Right.
And I did put this in the chat, but if you want, so one of the things in our library instruction that we can do is kind of format a conversation regarding evaluating information sources. And we can focus it specifically on news or on online resources or whatever your students will be.
Okay. Great. Well, thanks everybody for participating. Really appreciate it. And we'll see you guys around campus this week. Absolutely. So. All righty, take care. Thanks, everybody.